Chapter 41. Master Wan. Good girl, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Both Qin Yu and Xiao Xing couldn't contain their expressions. Xiao Xing scratched his head and chuckled lowly, except that his voice was a little bit floating. Ah, don't joke around. Qin Yu clenched her fingers. Subjectively, she didn't believe it at all, but this was Su Yaoguang she was talking about. Other people might joke around, but he wouldn't. Su Yaoguang's eyes were still and he looked very calm. His lips were pursed and he didn't speak. Xiao Xing was speechless now. Even Qin Yu knew that Su Yaoguang wasn't joking, so how could he not know? At the cafeteria, he bought a box of soy milk, inserted the straw into it, and said after a moment, "Is it really her?" "Yeah." Su Yaoguang bought a bowl of porridge, his expression still cold. Xiao Xing was completely speechless at this moment. Qin Yu sat beside them and was ignored for the first time. She was even more confused in her heart. How could it be Qin Ran? How could it be her? The disposable chopsticks in Qin Yu's hands were almost deformed. Who the hell was Qin Ran? Her studies were bad and she didn't have any expertise other than fighting. In the past, besides the violin, she didn't even attend any other interest classes. She had a weird personality and not many people were willing to play with her. How could she draw? And so well too. Qin Yu always felt that Qin Ran was under her control, like she knew everything about her, but today Qin Yu found that after having not seen Qin Ran for so many years, her knowledge of her was blank. Thinking of it, the disposable chopsticks tightened again. She looked up and smiled casually. "I'll go practice the violin. Young Master Su, I'll go find Qin Ran." Xiao Xing stood up suddenly. Su Yaoguang nodded, his eyes cold. "Sure." A group of people was gathered in class 3.9 and Lin Siren went out to buy breakfast. Xiao Xing was sitting on Lin Siren's stool. Qin Ran was still sleeping. He reached out, poked her arm, and turned his head carefully to say, "Did you draw it?" Xiao Xing. Qin Ran was still covered in her school uniform. Her voice was a little hoarse, and her tone was low. "Don't make noise." She was reluctant to say more, and Xiao Xing remembered that usually when the class was noisy, she would frown. Thus, he immediately zipped his mouth. As soon as he turned, there were more and more people in the class. It was like a vegetable market, so noisy that it caused a headache. He kicked the table across the aisle. Squeak, a very rough and harsh sound. The crowd quieted, and Xiao Xing put a hand on the table and looked at them sideways. "Be quieter." Subsequently, their voices gradually decreased. It was already a convention between these students not to provoke Qin Ran. Qin Ran lay down for a while, and the noises in her ears disappeared, so she took the school uniform over her head and took a breath of fresh air. She sat on the chair with her knees on the table, leaning against the back wall. "That drawing." Xiao Xing glanced at her. At this angle, he could clearly see her thick and dense long eyelashes, and Xiao Xing thought to himself that the students were right to give her the nickname Eyelash Essence. "It's me, but don't say it out." Qin Ran thought about it and frowned again. She could imagine just how long she would be watched like a monkey every day if those students knew. "Shit." Xiao Xing was silent for a moment, then he stiffened and said, "Why did you draw Yan Shi? Do you like him?" "Who likes that stuff?" It was Lin Siren. Qin Ran hugged her arms and leaned against the wall. She looked annoyed at the noise and was dispirited, but even that didn't hide her delicate face. "I understand." Xiao Xing laughed. In first middle school, 7 out of 10 were fans of Yan Shi. It was the first time Yan Shi had been referred to as that stuff. The person who had drawn the board still wasn't known. The forum and Weibo had been discussing for 2 days to no avail. No one came out to claim it, and no one could identify who it was. But it didn't hinder Qin Ran's popularity in the slightest. Lin Siren had been responsible for the board, and Class 3.9 could see how attentively Siren had been to Qin Ran for the past 2 days. Because of this, Qin Ran's popularity in Class 3.9 and in the school rose to another degree. Not only did it spread all over the third graders, but even the freshmen also knew that there was a legendary campus belle called Qin Ran. They all wanted to see her, but they didn't dare come to the third graders' building. Qin Ran left school in the afternoon and took her thermos cup to the school hospital. What's going on with the students these days? Forget about it if the girls are probing their brains about this kind of thing, but even the boys too. Lu Xiaoying's ear studs reflected light. Master Wan, is your charisma irresistible to the boys now, too? Cheng Wan didn't speak. The young girl was slender under the sun, and she was stopped by a boy who seemed to hand her a letter in a pink cover. The girl received it politely. The boy didn't leave and stood outside the school doctor's office, staring at Qin Ran's back. Lu Xiaoying burst into laughter and said, "Oh, so it was for Qin Ran. I finally met someone who could compete with you." There was no expression on Cheng Wan's face. He wore a shirt and casual pants that outlined his long legs. It was a very sexy pattern. He had a pair of black and white eyes, and the corners of his mouth casually curled up coldly. Qin Ran put down her things and went to the kitchen to take a look. She saw Cheng Wan staring at her and paused. "What's wrong?" Master Wan retracted his gaze and was restless. "The senior year is very important. I think it's important to study hard and not be distracted by other things." Lu Xiaoying. Qin Ran nodded solemnly. "Thank you, I think so too." Master Wan was surprised at her obedience. Qin Ran went in. There were still people hanging around outside, and Master Wan leaned casually on the sofa. Lu Xiaoying, close the door. In the Lin family. Qin Yu was sitting absent-mindedly at the dinner table. The joy on Ning Qing's face was undisguised as she whispered, "I heard that Mrs. Feng likes you very much." "Yeah." At the mention of this, Qin Yu's mood improved and she cheered up. Ning Qing's eyes brightened and she was happier. She gave Qin Yu a piece of meat. "Get along well with Mrs. Feng, that Feng Ci." The Feng family had power in Yuncheng, and it was too difficult to make friends with them. After so many years, it was the first time that Lin Wan had treated her with a good attitude. Ning Qing looked at Qin Yu, her eyes softening. She lowered her voice, using only a volume that Qin Yu could hear. "What's wrong?" Lin Wan, who was sitting opposite, also saw that Qin Yu wasn't in a good mood. "There's a parent meeting on Saturday." Qin Yu turned back and smiled. She would never mention that Qin Ran had painted the board so well, but it really did make her think of something. She seemed hesitant to speak. "The entire third grade has it. Sister is also in the third grade. Mother, you should go to her parent meeting, and let brother or father attend mine." Chapter 42. Qin Ran's brother. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ning Qing had been smiling at her previous sentence, but at the last sentence, her smile faded slightly. She thoughtfully said, "I'll take care of this, don't you worry." After hearing Ning Qing's words, Qin Yu's lips froze slightly. She lowered her head and ate. Seeing Ning Qing's posture, it was apparent she didn't intend to talk about this at the dinner table. After dinner, Qin Yu specially watched Ning Qing's movements and saw her go outside to call someone. After thinking about it, she followed her. Ning Qing made 2 phone calls to Qin Ran, but she didn't pick up. She frowned and called a 3rd time. Qin Ran finally picked up. Her voice was somber and concise. "What? You have a parent meeting on Saturday, right?" Ning Qing said, pressing her temple. "I'm going to yours. Call your aunt and ask her to attend your parent meeting." The parent-teacher meeting was linked to the students' performance and attitude. Ning Qing had gone for several parent-teacher meetings for Qin Yu. At that time, they had all been in the same class. Li Erong had even named the parents whose child had bad grades. She didn't say anything serious and only criticized a little, but in the adult world, it was shameful. Thinking about Qin Ran's daily habits and grades, Ning Qing would definitely not go for her parent meeting. She was also Qin Yu's mother. Qin Yu performed well in school and was very popular. When she walked with Qin Yu, she could even hear people discussing if she was Qin Yu's mother. Every time she had a parent meeting for Qin Yu, she received the attention of other parents. Out of these two options, Ning Qing would definitely choose Qin Yu. Qin Yu stood at the door, and when she heard the words, she pinched her fingers. To be honest, rather than Ning Qing, she hoped that Lin Qi or Lin Jinxian would attend instead. Unexpectedly, Ning Qing didn't even consider Qin Ran. Qin Yu was depressed. At this time, she even hoped that Qin Ran wasn't so lousy. Qin Ran hung up Ning Qing's phone impatiently. She heard her mother's words and laughed. Both of her aunt's children were in school and her uncle was also in the hospital. Aunt usually took time off to visit grandmother. Qin Ran hadn't even thought of asking her to come for her parent-teacher meeting. She walked to the classroom with her thermos cup filled with water. Her eyes were somber and her face cold, exuding a chill all around her. This didn't affect those looking at her or whispering about her. Within a few days of coming to school, Mu Ying felt Qin Ran's popularity. Whether it was a post on the school or on the road, the topic was about Qin Ran. Instead, Qin Yu wasn't much discussed. These days, especially, people mainly talked about the mysterious bulletin board. After all, Qin Ran was a new student and her looks even surpassed Qin Yu's. Qin Yu was also very good looking, but they had seen her for 2 years and were aesthetically tired, especially when they could now look at Qin Ran's appearance and compare them. Mu Ying was a freshman and was still in military training. After dinner in the evening, she continued to train. The task of their class today was to clean the playground. A group of people walked on the road and unexpectedly saw Qin Ran. Mu Ying, look, your campus belle cousin. Li Yuhan held Mu Ying's arm and whispered, her expression excited. As soon as Mu Ying looked up, she really saw Qin Ran. She immediately waved and yelled, cousin. Just after finishing a phone call with Ning Qing, Qin Ran wasn't in a good mood. Mu Ying called her not far away. She looked up and her face slightly softened. She nodded slightly and glanced over. How are you adapting to class? The new classmates are all very good, Mu Ying smiled and spoke. She glanced at the cup in Qin Ran's hand. The cup lid was also inlaid with a circle of diamond. Like decorations, shiny, delicate and beautiful. She couldn't help but glance at it one more time. Qin Ran nodded. Because she had stopped for a while, the sight around her became more apparent. Qin Ran, wait for me. Not far away, Xiao Sheng ran over with a basketball. He walked to Qin Ran and grabbed the hem of his clothes to wipe his sweat. Because he liked to play basketball, his abdominal muscles were obvious. He was handsome and was a well-known rich second generation in the school. There were more people glancing here and Mu Ying even heard people say, Qin Ran and Xiao Sheng together. Of course, Mu Ying knew who Xiao Sheng was. She couldn't help but stare at him. He was indeed an outstanding campus figure. Bring me a cup of Coke. Xiao Sheng instructed his younger brother, and then tilted his head and asked Qin Ran, what do you want? Qin Ran shook her head. Okay. Xiao Sheng weighed his basketball and smiled at Mu Ying. Do you know each other? Yeah, she's my cousin. Qin Ran put her hand in her pocket and glanced at Mu Ying. She said lazily, her expression slightly arrogant, I'm leaving, come and find me at class 3.9 if anything happens. Yes, cousin, come to me too. Xiao Sheng followed Qin Ran while holding his basketball. He grinned at Mu Ying before following Qin Ran quickly. He wasn't even annoyed that Qin Ran had kicked him aside. Unexpectedly, Xiao Sheng and Qin Ran were close. He seemed much closer to her than to Qin Yu. Mu Ying, are you a relative of the campus belle? The boys in Mu Ying's class looked at her in surprise. The girls in the class also looked at Mu Ying with envy, and she was surrounded by people quickly. Mu Ying remembered the logo on Qin Ran's cup. When she was picking up trash on the playground, she took out her mobile phone and searched the internet. The cup that looked very beautiful turned out to be a luxury brand. She didn't find the one that Qin Ran had, but she saw that this brand's cups were at least 4,000 yuan. It was almost Ning Wei's 1 month salary. Didn't she hear that the Lin family didn't like cousin? Then why did they buy such an expensive cup for her? In the quiet alley by the school, Feng Ci looked at the girl on the opposite side and pressed her eyebrows. Why did you move out of the Feng family? Pan Mingyue bowed her head and whispered, I want to study hard for senior year. Study hard. Feng Ci raised his eyebrows. Don't just say it to please me, okay? Pan Mingyue looked up, glanced at him, and turned to leave. She was pulled by her wrists, and he wrapped his hands around her waist. The man leaned on her shoulder and conceded. We haven't seen each other for several months, yet you're still so cold to me. Senior year. Pan Mingyue opened her mouth. Feng Ci interrupted her. You want to study hard, right? Your results are already good enough for Peking University. Pan Mingyue sighed. Brother Feng, I'm really not a genius. Not far away was the voice of students talking. Pan Mingyue was the top student and was quite famous. Feng Ci let go of her reluctantly. What relationship do you have with my father? Feng Ci stared at her and pinched her cheeks. Don't tell me you're really my dad's illegitimate daughter. Pan Mingyue had never mentioned her parents. Feng Ci had investigated it before to no avail. It was as if someone had covered it up deliberately. Pan Mingyue had wanted to explain the parent-teacher meeting. At the mention of this, she swallowed her words and lowered her head, her eyes dim. The parents' meeting was on Saturday. The students also had to be present for the meeting, but they were either standing in the corridor or at the back of the classroom. The parents sat on the corresponding student seats in the classroom. Ning Qin wore a set of new seasonal outfit today and took Qin Yu out of the car by the arm. The black BMW wasn't much noticeable behind a Cayenne. High school seniors with their parents were everywhere on campus. Ning Qin maintained her expression. She had come for such meetings for Qin Yu before, once a year, and every time she brought Qin Yu here, she would receive lots of attention. She walked into the school gate with Qin Yu. As soon as she smiled, she heard a voice not far behind. Oh, Qin Ran's parents didn't come. Mom, I wanted you to bring you to see my future father.in.law or mother.in.law. Dad, Qin Ran is our campus belle I told you about. Later on, you can take a look at class 3.9's board, she found someone to do it. Then, the crowd surged, and another student pushed Ning Qin aside, holding her mobile phone in his hand, shouting excitedly, is this really Qin Ran's brother? Her brother looks like that. Chapter 43. Qin Ran's popularity is too strong. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There were many high school seniors and their guardians. They rushed over enthusiastically at the same time. It was just that their voices weren't as Ning Qin had imagined. In first middle school, the students either had good grades or had good families, and all had excellent conditions. It wasn't easy to be outstanding amongst these people. For a long time, Ning Qin had been the mother of the child other parents compared their kids to. In the past, when she came to first middle school, she and Qin Yu were the targets of other people's attention, but now, Qin Ran was chanted in all of their mouths. Ning Qin was a bit uncomfortable. Mrs. Chiao. She saw a familiar figure in front and subconsciously called. Mrs. Lin. The speaker was wearing a long blue dress. She looked gentle and spoke softly and swiftly, not like the handsome and dauntless-looking young man beside her. Xiao Xing squinted and glanced at her, but his eyes didn't stop wavering. "Mom, hurry." Mrs. Chiao said sorry to Ning Qing and walked sideways with Xiao Sheng. She could also hear her whisper to Xiao Sheng, "What are you anxious about? Qin Ran and her brother can't possibly run away, right?" Xiao Sheng's family business was accomplished in Beijing and abroad. Although Father Qiao was a startup, he was indeed a business genius. In Yuncheng, legend had it that Mrs. Qiao was Beijing's most prestigious lady. Ning Qing didn't know much about these high society things, but she knew that everyone in Yuncheng was afraid of the Qiao family. In the past, because of Qin Yu, Ning Qing could barely say a few words to Mrs. Qiao, so they weren't very close. Xiao Sheng was mischievous and was difficult to approach as well. But now, Ning Qing listened to the two of them talking about Qin Ran as if they were old friends. "You are..." Ning Qing had rarely been scorned so much in Qin Yu's school and was more surprised than offended. She hesitated and asked Qin Yu, "Is there another person called Qin Ran in your school?" Qin Yu lowered her head slightly and didn't immediately answer. She also felt depressed. Recently, Qin Ran had been too popular. She was cold and proud, and not only did the boys all like her, but the girls were also her fans. "It's almost time, Mom, let's go to the class first." Qin Yu avoided Ning Qing's question. I see him. Qin Ran's brother is so handsome. Oh my God, they're really a goddess and a god, I love it. The surrounding voices came, and Ning Qing was visibly upset. She didn't even notice that Qin Yu had answered her. Qin Ran had no knowledge and skills and couldn't do anything to excel in this group of heavenly pride. The prestigious families in Yuncheng had many senior students, and Ning Qing recognized a few of the ladies. This was why Ning Qing hadn't wanted to go for Qin Ran's meeting. At first, the director of teaching was unwilling to accept Qin Ran, so Ning Qing was in a complicated mood. It was probably someone with the same name. She didn't believe that Qin Ran would be so popular with the students. The parent meeting was nothing more than emphasizing the high school seniors. "Mom, my seat is there." Xiao Sheng stood on the window, pointing to his seat in the classroom, surrounded by many girls. "That's Qin Ran's brother." Xiao Sheng pointed to Qin Ran's seat but didn't see Qin Ran. He glanced around trying to locate her. Mrs. Chiao smiled calmly as she walked towards Xiao Sheng's seat while looking at the girl's seat. The girl had surfaced frequently in Xiao Sheng's house recently. Xiao Sheng was always talking about her. She saw a lazy, beautiful man sitting on the seat. Mrs. Chiao's footsteps shook and her complexion changed at a speed that was visible to the naked eye, and she could barely stabilize her footsteps. There were many people looking at him, but Cheng Wan could still distinguish Mrs. Chiao's gaze. He glanced at her slightly and saw Mrs. Chiao. Bdnvl.m. It wasn't someone he knew. Cheng Wan retracted his gaze, leaned back, and spun a pen around his hand. Under the light obliquely shining through the window, his bones were clear, his features smooth and his complexion glowing. His long legs awkwardly rested under the table. The middle-aged woman at the front table pulled the chair too quickly and accidentally hit the table. There were so many things on the little girl's table that it couldn't withstand the force. Boom! Cheng Wan lowered his head. The floor was full of letters. There were pink letters, baby blue letters, white letters with red hearts. There were dozens. Siren's deskmate is so popular. This was Lin Siren's father. He saw that Cheng Wan was so young and touched his head and said, "You're Siren's deskmate's brother or uncle." Cheng Wan picked up the things on the ground expressionlessly. He raised his head and looked upset but was polite. "I'm neither." Then Cheng Wan repeated patiently and calmly, "I am not her relative." His tone was very approachable, but Master Wan had a strong aura and it was obvious at first glance that he wasn't an ordinary person. The people in the room were even afraid to meet eyes with him. The parents in the class were discussing with each other about Master Wan. The parents sitting beside him were very quiet. Cheng Wan was slow and thoughtful as he tidied the letters. Very good, there were 30.2 letters. It looked like she had only collected them from last night. He confiscated them all. Master Wan was very cold. Gao Yang doesn't criticize the students and mostly gave them encouragement. He wrote an observation manual for each student and distributed it to the parents one by one. The development on his side was slow, but the parent meeting of the first class was very fast. Li Erong gave a few typical compliments, and then picked a few typical retrogressive students to criticize. The parent meeting ended early. Qin Yu's studies were good and she was also busy with the school's anniversary. Li Erong praised those key points. These years, people gathered together either for their husbands or their children. Ning Qing was obviously very used to it and her hesitation disappeared. I heard that you is going to study in Beijing with a famous teacher. Mrs. Lin, you're blessed. A familiar little sister praised. Ning Qing laughed. Qin Yu had always been her pride, so of course she was happy to hear someone boasting about Qin Yu. She was about to say something. She saw a commotion in the corridor. What are they looking at? Ning Qing glanced over. The little sisters around also gathered together and laughed. Look, it's Qin Ran. I heard from my daughter that she just transferred over this semester and even has the same surname as your daughter. But this child is really so beautiful, no wonder she's so popular. Isn't that the Qiao family beside her? Ning Qing turned away from the crowd and looked downstairs. The girl's back was cold, her eyes narrowed, and she was indifferently arrogant. The boy beside her was holding a few bottles of water for her. It was a well-known face. Ning Qing snorted inwardly, her head blank. Chapter 44. Ning Qing's Doubts, Master Wei of Beijing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Xiao Xing had to ask several students before realizing that Qin Ran had come with her brother. Then, he went to the store. He saw that Gao Yang wasn't going to end anytime soon and went to find Qin Ran. Your brother. Xiao Sheng had thought that Qin Ran's brother was Lin Jinxian, but he saw that it wasn't. He had never heard Qin Ran say that she had an older brother. Hold your water properly. Qin Ran glanced at the second floor and saw Ning Qing in the crowd at one glance. She casually retracted her eyes, raised her eyebrows, her tone indifferent. Xiao Xing scratched his head and remembered that Ning Qing had come with Qin Yu in the morning. He thought of how they both had the same mother and lowered his head in silence. He followed her step by step. That's Xiao Sheng, right? Ning Qing's friend whispered. Xiao Sheng looked spoiled, but after all, he was the Qiao family's master. Other than toward Su Yaoguang, it was rare to see him having such a good temper. Ning Qing naturally saw him as well. The boy downstairs followed behind Qin Ran casually, holding water in his hand, and often tilted his head to talk to the girl. The girl was lazy and didn't like to speak, but the young master didn't mind. He was still smiling. I'm going to the bathroom. Ning Qing's mood was a little complicated and she said absently. She didn't hold a parent-teacher meeting for Qin Ran because she was afraid of being shamed. She was afraid that people would look at her with strange eyes and criticize her. Look, that's Qin Ran's mother. But now. Ning Qing turned on the tap and patted water on her face. The parent meeting of class 3.9 was almost over. Gao Yang left Cheng Wan alone to speak in the office. He handed Cheng Wan a small observation diary and said, "It's not that Qin Ran isn't smart. If she works hard, it's not impossible for her to go to college. She needs the cooperation of her parents to guide her. If you have time, you can show more concern about her life. There's no such thing as letting a child be." Facing Cheng Wan, Gao Yang felt some inexplicable pressure that he didn't feel in front of Xiao Xing's parents. He was obviously very tepid but was also very elegant. Cheng Wan flipped through this small observation diary. It didn't have many pages, but it was very meticulous. He even wrote down the books Qin Ran read. "Thank you, teacher." Cheng Wan closed the observation diary. Normally, Master Wan wouldn't even listen to others, but today, he listened very carefully to the teachings. "I will guide her well." After speaking, he went out to where Qin Ran and Xiao Xing were. He turned and followed Mrs. Qiao. "You are Qin Ran's." Xiao Xing thought that Cheng Wan was Qin Ran's cousin or something, and he even sighed in his heart that their genes were indeed very good. Cheng Wan didn't say anything. He just shoved the manual into his pocket and looked at Xiao Xing calmly. He was a handsome man, but Xiao Xing's voice was inexplicably tight. "I'm not her brother." Cheng Wan looked down. His eyes were dark and seemed to have nothing but Qin Ran in his eyes. His voice was smooth and husky. Then Xiao Xing was kicked by his mother before he could say another word. Anxious and fierce. Xiao Xing swallowed back his words. Qin Ran also went to see her grandmother. When the four of them arrived at the school gate, they parted ways. After Qin Ran had left with Cheng Wan, Xiao Xing rubbed his legs. "Mom, why did you hit me? Don't be such a busybody." Mrs. Qiao looked at the departing Volkswagen and the Beijing sign on the back. She was finally certain. "Next time," to Qin Ran. "Forget it." She wanted to say something but still held back. She glanced at the direction in which the car had just left. "Let's go back." The black car with the Beijing license plate stopped at the hospital door. "When you come down, just give me a call in advance. I'll be in the building opposite the inpatient department." Cheng Wan put his hand on the steering wheel. He looked sideways and opened the door for Qin Ran. The space in the car wasn't small and Qin Ran was deep in her own thoughts. When she came to her senses, Cheng Wan had already opened the door. His face was close to her. She could clearly see his features, delicate and beautiful, and his mint-cold fragrance surrounded her. It only lasted a few seconds before the door opened. Qin Ran got out of the car. Cheng Wan stared after her back, shrouded in sunshine, thin and arrogant. He smiled slightly. Cheng Wan didn't get out of the car. In fact, he didn't have anything to do today. He slowly took out the observation diary that Gao Yang had just given him and looked at the suggestions written in it. For a long while, he lowered half of the car window, took out a cigarette and smoked. His eyes became clearer. Qin Ran didn't tell her grandmother about the parents' meeting. She came late today, so she made an excuse at will and her grandmother never doubted her. Ning Wei and Mu Nan were both here. Mu Ying and Mu Nan just ended military training yesterday. Both of them were tanned. Mu Nan was still fine, but Mu Ying had gone one shade darker. Visiting grandma together on Saturday morning had become a convention. After a while, Ning Qing arrived. She seemed to be thinking of something complicated. "Did you or not come today?" Chen Shulan was not in a good state of mind. Her hair was gray and she was sick. Ning Qing took a look at Qin Ran, put away her complex thoughts, and smiled. Yue went back to practice the violin. Her aunt found a famous teacher in Beijing, a world-class palace master. Yue has been working hard recently for him to accept her as his apprentice. Speaking of Qin Yu, Ning Qing had a strong smile on her face. Qin Yu's presence was indeed her pride. Second cousin is amazing. Mu Ying was surprised. She didn't know much about these, but hearing about the master surprised her. Yes, her teacher has been touring around the world recently. When he comes back to Beijing, Yue will go and see him. Mu Ying brought Ning Qing a chair, and Ning Qing sat down. She talked as if he was already Qin Yu's teacher. "That's good. Chen Shulan couldn't help but look at Qin Ran, who was cutting her apple slowly and seriously. The sharp fruit knife became a toy to her. Chen Shulan sighed and turned her head. Which teacher is you are going to worship? Master Wei Lin. Ning Qing held up a glass of water and took a sip. You must have never heard of him. Wei Lin was a professional palace-level master. His reputation had spread to the upper classes, and Ning Qing also only knew of him recently. Just after she finished speaking, she saw Chen Shulan freeze. Mom, what's wrong with you? Chapter 45. First Vest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mom, what's wrong with you? Ning Qing felt that Chen Shulan's reaction was strange. Chen Shulan looked up and hesitantly said, This teacher Wei Lin, sounds familiar. Qin Ran had peeled the apple's skin and cut it into small pieces. She squeezed a piece into Chen Shulan's mouth and said blankly, Grandma, eat the apples. Chen Shulan's words were trapped back into her throat. Ning Qing put the teacup down and didn't pay much attention. Oh. I think it's probably one of your mahjong friends that has the same name. It's a typical name. Maybe, Chen Shulan said vaguely. Her teeth weren't good now, so she chewed very slowly. Qin Ran finished cutting the apple. She put it on a plate and inserted a few toothpicks into the slices. Chen Shulan kept looking at Qin Ran silently. Qin Ran sighed silently, lowered her head and said warmly, I'll go back to school first. She still had to do her part-time job at the bubble tea shop. Go and study hard. Grandma is waiting for you to enter university. Qin Ran lowered her head slightly and seemed to be smiling, but she said solemnly, Yeah, I will. She turned around and went out. Ning Qing remembered the parents' meeting this morning and went out as well. On the hospital bed, Chen Shulan looked at Qin Ran's back, her eyes murky. She had indeed heard the name, Teacher Wei Lin, before. Wasn't the teacher who had come from the capital to their Ninghai village and stayed there for a whole month, wanting to accept Qin Ran as his apprentice, also called Wei Lin? Outside the door, Ning Qing overtook Qin Ran in 3 or 2 steps. This was a VIP ward and there weren't many people in the corridor. Ning Qing lowered her voice. Why didn't you let your aunt go to your parents' meeting today? My aunt is busy. Without Grandma's presence, Qin Ran looked impatient. She glanced at her, her pretty eyebrows a little cold, still looking sloppy. She raised her hand and pressed the elevator door. Anything else? Then. Ning Qing's mind was still full of what had happened in school. She asked, How are you getting along with your classmates in school? Are you used to studying? Have you made any friends? After so many days of school, this was the first time that Qin Ran had heard Ning Qing ask about her learning. It's okay, she said patiently and succinctly. I'll go first. Ning Qing also wanted to ask if she was familiar with Xiao Sheng, but Qin Ran didn't want to talk to her anymore. She could only watch as the elevator door closed slowly in front of her. Her expression was complex. Qin Ran went downstairs. She had a bus card and didn't plan to call Chengwan. Bus 12 went directly to First Middle School, which was particularly convenient. As soon as she got out of the hospital gate, she hadn't even reached the bus stop opposite when a black car stood in front of her. The window was lowered. Chengwan tapped the steering wheel with his pretty fingers, leaned on his side, raised his eyebrows, and said slowly, Get on. The car drove directly to the school medical office. Qin Ran noticed that the school doctor's room door was open. She paused. Didn't he say that Lu Zhaoying had matters to attend to today? She was just thinking about it. She saw a man in black coming out of the school medical office. He was wearing short sleeves and the cyan tattoo on his arm was faint. He was full of a fierce aura and didn't look good to provoke. Master Wan, the man in black said when Cheng Wan got out of the car, respectfully and cautiously. The investigation. Before he finished, he saw another person getting out of the car with Master Wan. It wasn't too surprising that another person was in the car with Master Wan, but the fact that it was a woman. The man in black was stunned. "Let's eat first." It was hot outside, and Cheng Wan reached out and unbuttoned a button on his neckline. He thought of something and said in a low voice, "Did you bring the things?" "I did." The man in black regained his senses. But he couldn't help glancing over at Qin Ran. When the three entered the house, Qin Ran saw a stack of books on the empty table in the school medical office. It wasn't an exaggeration to describe it as stacks. "Drink water." Cheng Wan took the cup and poured a glass of warm water for Qin Ran. He went over to the stack of books on the table. After picking and choosing, he drew 5 books and handed them out to Qin Ran. Qin Ran glanced casually at the book. College Entrance Examination Review Step 1. "Mr. Gao asked me to make sure you're studying." Cheng Wan turned and poured himself a glass of water. His voice was lazy and he narrowed his eyes. "I picked it out, it's perfect for you." Cheng Wan came over holding the water. While she had been visiting her grandmother in the hospital, he had come up with a review plan for her. He walked over, pointed at a book with his finger, and lowered himself to Qin Ran's height. He lowered his head and wanted to introduce these review materials to Qin Ran. Qin Ran picked up a book, blinked, tilted her head, and slowly said, "I don't need it." That the eyes of the two inevitably met. A strand of hair was slanted across his eyes, mouth, nose, and forehead. This distance made even his slight breathing sound obvious. Qin Ran was usually indifferent, cold and unconcerned. Cheng Wan couldn't stand it. He stood up straight, took a step back and said seriously, "Mr. Gao said that you're very smart. As long as you're willing to study, it'll be easy for you to get into college." Qin Ran tilted her head and focused her attention on the book, only to find that she had never seen the information on the book. She took all 5 books. One of the above books had a hyperbola drawn and seemed to have a bunch of messy numbers. The next book was a review of physics. Qin Ran paused and then said, "Thank you." Today's meal was still delivered by the hotel, and the man in black tried hard to make himself invisible. He refrained from looking at Qin Ran. Qin Ran returned to her bedroom after eating. This weekend, there was no one in the bedroom. Wu Yan had gone to self-study and Lin Siren had gone home with her father. Qin Ran put the books on the table. Then she took out the computer and turned it on. The computer turned on quickly, she reached out and quickly pressed a few keys, and a voice popped up. A voice from the man over there said, "Are you finally contacting me? Talk." Qin Ran went to the bathroom and took a towel to wipe her face. She turned on the voice changer, and her voice was blurred. "Everyone else is anxiously asking me if you're starting to accept orders." The man paused, grumbled and complained. "Master, you said that you were in a bad state and wanted to take a break, but you know how long you have gone without any orders. 1 year and 4 months. Qin Ran sat on the chair, flipped the book with her other hand, and laughed. "Chang Ning, I remember taking a 10 million order just a few days ago." If someone who knew about this matter was present, his expression would definitely change instantly. Chang Ning, the founder of 129 Detective Office, didn't know whether this detective office was linked to the dark web, but everyone knew that even if it was cross-border, as long as there was money involved, there was no information that 129 couldn't find and no case they couldn't solve. "So, are you in a good state now?" Chang Ning asked seriously. Chapter 46. Lone Wolf, Ran studying. You are listening at novelfull.audio. "Ah," Qin Ran said casually. She looked at the title of the information book with great care. "Last time the order was an accident, but my state is better." "Really?" Chang Ning had only asked casually as a joke, but after hearing Qin Ran's answer, he was stunned instead and shot up from the sofa. "Let's start next month." Qin Ran put the book aside, picked up another one, and spoke slowly, I'm not in a rush. Oh my God, even if you start next month, I won't have any opinion. Chang Ning walked a few steps in his room, unable to hide his excitement. He finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. As long as you're willing to come back. Do you know how scared I was that you'll stop taking orders after disappearing for 1 whole year? As long as Qin Ran didn't quit, Chang Ning was at ease. Qin Ran wasn't surprised by Chang Ning's attitude. There were many members in the 129 Detective Agency. Even if an external psychological criminal detective was only an ordinary member, once placed in the outside world and producing his information, he was more useful and had more work experience than being in an inspection team for 1 year. It was too difficult to join 129. Qin Ran was a lone senior wolf in 129. As long as she took the order, there was nothing she couldn't do. She was also a veteran of 129. Because the headquarters was in Beijing, Qin Ran had never met the members of 129. Chang Ning knew her real name was Qin Ran but didn't know her age. Qin Ran had joined 4 years ago. At that time, her voice had been slightly immature, so for the convenience of work, she had used a voice changer. She had used it until now. Then you've worried too much. I'm short of money. Qin Ran leaned against the back of the chair casually. It's good to be short of money. If she was short of money, she wouldn't resign. Chang Ning grinned. If the people in Beijing saw that the steel-face and selfless director had such a side to him, their jaws would probably drop. You said you could come to Beijing this year. When are you coming? Before other forces could find the lone wolf, Chang Ning wanted to tie her to 129. Something went wrong. Qin Ran looked down at the book and her focus drifted off. I can go next year. Chang Ning paused. What's up? Qin Ran was very generous and casual. The college entrance examination. Chang Ning froze for a moment, then said again, if you don't want to say it, I'll just spread the news of your return first. Qin Ran hung up. She swore that from beginning to end, she had never lied. Her heavy black cell phone that had been put aside lit up again. I really didn't find it. I'll take you to scan next time. Qin Ran slammed the phone onto the table. The phone buzzed and vibrated a few times again. Seeing that Qin Ran really didn't care about it anymore, it wasn't very happy and quietened again. Pan Mingyue, why didn't your guardian come again? Li Erong looked at the student in front of her, frowning. Forget it, give me your guardian's phone number. Pan Mingyue pursed her lips. She lowered her head so that her face couldn't be seen. Teacher, my uncle is busy and has no time. However, the college entrance examination is very important. Don't delay your college entrance examination because of these things. Li Erong was the class teacher of Pan Mingyue. She naturally knew that her parents had died and that she was staying with her relatives now. Last time, your results fluctuated. The dorm is too noisy and has affected your studies. I hope to talk to your guardian and let you continue to study well. Teacher, I promise I can do better next exam, Pan Mingyue only said simply. In the end, Li Erong didn't say anything and just frowned unhappily. She couldn't find the phone number of Pan Mingyue's guardian on the file, nor did she know what was going on at the school. How could such obviously flawed files be included? Pan Mingyue was stopped at the school by a middle-aged man before returning to the class. Mrs. is looking for you. She followed him in silence. Not far from the school gate, a Porsche was parked. She sat in the driver's seat, and the graceful woman in the back seat finally raised her head. Pan Mingyue, who are you showing off to? Pan Mingyue froze. Aunt. Mrs. Feng sneered and said, Uncle Feng isn't here, so you don't have to be so fake and call me. You had a parent meeting today, right? Pan Mingyue, I know about you. Don't think that you can influence anyone by doing this. I'll tell phone Luching the truth today. Pan Mingyue got out of the car and watched the Porsche drive further and further away. The sun was shining above her head, but she felt cold all over. Lu Xiaoying strolled around and finally went back to school at 12 o'clock. There weren't many people in the school. When he walked to the school hospital with his mobile phone, he saw a somewhat familiar figure squatting on the edge of the path. The other person had her head burrowed between her knees. He looked for a long while, but the other party didn't look up. He knew who it was by her short hair. "Classmate, aren't you Qin Ran's friend? What's wrong?" Lu Xiaoying's hand froze and he stuck a hand in his pocket. He crouched down in front of her. Pan Mingyue looked up, her face pale and her eyes red. Lu Xiaoying looked at her, thought about it, and went to the milk tea shop next door to buy a cup of hot milk tea. He handed it to her. Qin Ran's favorite. Pan Mingyue glanced at Lu Xiaoying for a long while, not knowing what to think. She took it and suddenly laughed. It was only for a moment and she was sullen again. She whispered, "Thank you," and walked around him. She was timid. Lu Xiaoying looked at her. She was clearly wearing a pair of trousers, but she showed her fair ankles because of her shortness. She and Qin Ran were really friends. They were both so poor. Master Lu always had no interest. With a wave of his hand in Beijing, women would stick to him like sticky notes. He looked at Pan Mingyue sideways as she left, not even turning back. After half a moment, he raised his head and chuckled. Xiao Xing laid on the table and looked at Qin Ran's direction. She wasn't reading those extra-curricular books today and had a review material in front of her. He had never seen that book before. Qin Ran wore headphones and sat sideways on a stool, propping her legs up casually. In this direction, most of her side face could be seen, and she was looking at a question in the book, frowning and seemingly very annoyed. "Young Master Su, you didn't come yesterday, so you don't know." He had heard that Qin Ran just started studying and reading today and was in a bad mood, so Xiao Xing didn't dare to provoke her at this time. He poked Su Yaoguang's shoulder. "Qin Ran's brother was here." He paused. "I don't know what relationship they have, but anyways, their family genes are really good." Su Yaoguang's family never came for the parent-teacher meeting, yet he had always been first in school, so the school had no opinion on it. Su Yaoguang heard the name Qin Ran and moved his eyebrows but didn't raise it. "Young Master Su, go and get the physics paper." Due to Xiao Sheng, most people called Su Yaoguang Young Master Su. Su Yaoguang put down his pen and went to the office to get the paper. Qin Yu was also there. She was slow and when she saw Su Yaoguang coming, she paused and came out with him casually. "This time, the paper is really difficult. I heard that only the passing rate is 50%. Did you complete the last question?" Su Yaoguang picked up the paper. Chemistry had always been his poor subject. He had answered all the other questions, but he couldn't solve the last question. "No," Qin Yu shook his head and spoke again. "I scanned through the papers and Pan Mingyue didn't solve it either." Su Yaoguang nodded. He quickened his pace to head to self-study. Qin Yu's hands were tight behind her. When Su Yaoguang was handing out the papers, he froze at Lin Siren's paper and said, "Lin Siren, how did you do this question?" He pointed to Lin Siren's last physics fill-in-the blank question, his gaze sharp. Lin Siren was working on a math paper. When she heard him asking her, she was stunned. Then, she patted Qin Ran. "Yeah, Ran, how did you do it?" Chapter 47. What a fairy deskmate. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Listening to Lin Siren's words, Su Yaoguang looked at Qin Ran, who was holding her head irritably and spinning a pen around. He was such a calm and composed person, yet even he couldn't react in time. "I couldn't do this question. But when I was submitting it, Ran helped me fill it in." Lin Siren seemed to see that Su Yaoguang was surprised and tilted her head to explain. Physics wasn't the same as Chinese, especially when filling in the blanks. This question was impossible to even start solving and time was tight, so Lin Siren had just given it a glance and skipped it. When she handed in the paper later, Lin Siren didn't even do many big questions, so how could she worry about filling in the blank questions? Lin Siren felt that Qin Ran had obsessive-compulsive disorder. She filled the paper up every time and didn't leave any empty blanks, and couldn't even bear to see her leaving an empty question down. She had taken her pen to fill it in for her. Knowing Qin Ran's rate of correct answers, Lin Siren had just let her write it. Unexpectedly, this time, she got it right. Lin Siren shook Qin Ran's arm again. Ran. Are you a pig? Qin Ran pressed her temple, placed her pen on the book and leaned back against the chair. She propped her legs and scanned over the question. If they couldn't even do this question, how could they go to Peking University? Qin Ran glanced at Lin Siren. As the highest academic institution in the country, Peking University ranked among the top universities in the world. Most of the people in first middle school were expected to enter Peking University. This question, Qin Ran raised her chin and cleared her throat. I did it randomly. Did it randomly, 5.5 times the number 11. Who was so bored to write down such a complicated answer randomly? The average person would guess a 2, or a root number 2. Lin Siren and Su Yaoguang obviously didn't believe it. That's it. Qin Ran sat casually and knocked on the table with one hand, motioning for Lin Siren to take the math paper out from under the table. Lin Siren took it out inexplicably and didn't forget to observe Qin Ran's expression. Qin Ran's face was still casual as she narrowed her eyes. I tried to solve this question for half the day and got this equation. Since it was wrong, I just copied it onto your answer sheet. Lin Siren and Su Yaoguang looked down. Qin Ran's first big question was indeed filled in with the equation. The first major problem in mathematics was basically divided into sub-dot questions. The correct answer was 36. Except for those who made careless mistakes, probably only Qin Ran in the whole school could give such a messy answer. Since she had worked so hard to figure it out for the first time, it made sense that she would keep it in her mind. Without Qin Ran explaining it, Lin Siren provided the reason for Qin Ran's brain. Oh, that's why. Lin Siren nodded. Su Yaoguang heard the words and furrowed his eyebrows, but didn't say anything more. He put down Qin Ran's paper and glanced over at the workbook that Qin Ran was doing. The book had a blue cover. It looked familiar. Su Yaoguang stepped forward. One more glance at that material and he saw that it was indeed the exercise booklet of the high school attached to Peking University. This exercise book was an exercise book produced by the middle school itself. It wasn't difficult, but it required very comprehensive and logical thinking training. Su Yaoguang had done it himself. This exercise book was only sold in the Beijing area. Other provinces and cities had no idea that there was such a review material. He had yet to see anyone use this exercise book in Yuncheng. Su Yaoguang couldn't help but take another look. Qin Ran put on the headset again and began to draw on the exercise book with a pen. She was still left-handed and wrote slowly, but didn't stay on the paper for long. Occasionally she drew on a piece of draft paper. Even though she was slow, she didn't stay and her writing was smooth. Within a minute, a blank question was written. Su Yaoguang glanced to the side. Qin Ran tore off the answer behind and pressed it under her arm. He looked away indifferently. He had been willing to remind her last time, but this time, he didn't even want to mention it. He distributed Qin Ran's paper and left directly. After writing a few pages of questions, Qin Ran turned the music's volume up and laid down on the table to sleep. Before going to sleep, she reached out and drew a few questions on Lin Siren's paper. I don't understand this, and that. Listen carefully, and tell me after class. When Li Erong came to the class to explain the exercises, she saw Qin Ran sleeping again and frowned. She really didn't know what the principal and Gao Yang were thinking. Placing such a person in the class simply affected the learning atmosphere. Qin Ran sighed. What kind of fairy deskmate was she to worry about her deskmate's studies? Principal's office. Principal Su was holding a book in his hand. He didn't read it and only held his glasses. He was surprised to see the person sitting in front of him. Young Master Cheng, what's the matter? Do you have the files of Qin Ran? Cheng Wan held a cup of tea and asked. His eyes were deep and his long fingertips reflected against the porcelain teacup. Yes. Principal Su froze and didn't quite know how to react. Change her emergency contact phone number to Lu Xiaoying's temporarily. Cheng Wan paused and said again, it seems that her family doesn't care about her. She is a high school student working in our school medical office. The Lu family did charity for everyone in Beijing. Principal Su didn't expect that Lu Xiaoying had such kindness. Cheng Wan reported a string of numbers. Principal Su noted it down. After Cheng Wan left, he looked at Cheng Wan's figure thoughtfully. It stood to reason that as the principal he shouldn't do so. The emergency contact was originally Ning Qing's number, which had never been changed ever since the primary school file. But Principal Su looked at the direction where Cheng Wan left. He still changed the number in the end. It was only when looking at this number did he realize afterward that Lu Xiaoying's number seemed to end with the number 8. Was this number the wrong one? Principal Su, someone is looking for you outside. Who? Principal Su returned to his senses. It's the Lin family. When Qin Ran went to the school medical office, Lu Xiaoying was prescribing medicine to a student. Cheng Wan wasn't in the school medical office. She went straight into the kitchen. After a while, the big man in black who she had seen before pushed open the door of the school's medical room and came in. His face was stiff and his body was full of anger. Where is young Master Cheng? He asked in a sigh of breath. He noticed someone in the kitchen and hesitated. It was the girl he had seen at noon the day before yesterday. The man in black lowered his voice subconsciously. He went to find Principal Su. Lu Xiaoying handed the medicine to the student, and when the student left the school's medical office, he turned his head. What's the matter? The Jiang team has found news. When he said this, the man in black paused. He took a look at the kitchen and had some reservations. There's no need to check anymore. Lu Xiaoying didn't avoid Qin Ran. He threw his pen on the table. The man in black didn't hold in his surprise. Why? We found LW. Cheng Wan pushed open the door and came in. The wind blew against him and his voice was low and lazy. The man in black was anxious and wanted to argue, but after hearing this sentence, his brain hanged and he didn't react. He just froze there. In the kitchen, Qin Ran's hands slipped and a glass cup fell by her feet, clang. Cheng Wan looked over there. Are you okay? Chapter 48. Is that Principal Su's car? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qin Ran squatted down and picked up the cup, emotionless. I'm okay. Cheng Wan came in to help her clean up the glass fragments on the ground. Qin Ran waited for him to walk out to talk to Lu Xiaoying and the other man before stopping. She stood there with her eyes lowered, thinking of something, a little stunned. The black cell phone had been set aside by her. After Cheng Wan went out, it lit up. 2 minutes later, it brightened impassively. Qin Ran came back to her senses and saw that it was desperately lighting up. She turned her head away expressionlessly and stopped looking at it. Cheng Mu. Outside the door, Lu Xiaoying put his legs on the table and his chair rotated 180 degrees backward. He spun a pen in his hand. I sent an email last time to Jiang Dongye, but I can't reveal the specific details. Cheng Mu was still stunned. After a long time, he found his voice, cleared his throat and said, "Master Wan, how did you do it?" LW, Lone Wolf, was number 1 in Detective Agency 129. Because it docked internationally, people from the outside world had given this nickname. Although Ching Mu was also the leader of the SWAT team that year, he didn't pass the exam 3 times and wasn't even an ordinary member. From criminal investigation to criminology, there wasn't anyone who had never heard of that genius in 129. Cheng Mu looked at the direction of the kitchen again, deliberately lowered his voice and said shakily, "I heard that he hasn't taken any orders for more than 1 year. How did you make him?" As he talked, Qin Ran came out with a few bowls. Cheng Mu immediately shut up and stopped the conversation. Thinking about it, Cheng Mu felt stupid again. There was no need to be so careful. The girl was wearing a school uniform and was a student. Even if she heard it, how would she know what he was saying? While eating, Cheng Wan first introduced the man in black to Qin Ran. "This is Cheng Mu. When I'm not around next time, you can find him." Qin Ran glanced at Cheng Mu and nodded. Then he started to ask about the few exercises he had given her. "Have you started doing them?" "Yeah." Qin Ran was sullen. "Okay." Lu Xiaoying smiled unconsciously and said, "Qin Ran, don't tell me you saved all the trouble and just copied the answers. Do you know what Master Wan did for that set?" Lu Xiaoying didn't finish speaking before Cheng Wan put his hand on the table and glared at him. Lu Xiaoying immediately waved his hand and put a chain on his mouth, indicating that he would shut up. He looked at Cheng Wan and sighed. Half a month ago, just when Cheng Wan was called here to do hard work, Lu Xiaoying never would have thought that he would encounter such a thing. Master Wan actually made such a big fuss over study review materials. Maybe those people in Beijing thought they were in such a hurry for some important files. Cheng Mu didn't dare to talk from start to finish, and he didn't have dinner with the two of them. After eating, Cheng Mu watched Qin Ran and Cheng Wan go out together. His frowns were slightly hesitant. "Young Master Lu, that girl. Don't mess with her." Lu Xiaoying leaned on the back of the chair. He had wanted to wash the dishes, but since Cheng Mu was here, he let him wash it. He smiled again. "Our Master Wan cares about her a lot." Cheng Mu stared at him, thinking what was it with this girl. There were a lot of women chasing Master Wan in Beijing, and even his own goddess was chasing Master Wan. How could they all not compare to a senior year student? It looked like her results weren't even particularly good. Oh, but she sure was beautiful. No one in Beijing could look better than her. Military training for high school had ended, and there were no freshmen wearing camouflage clothes to grab a meal in the cafeteria these days. Qin Ran was sitting on a chair, still fighting with the exercise book. She had on her black headphones and the volume was already very high, but for some reason, the classroom was still really noisy. Qin Ran only felt like her brain was being squeezed and was buzzing. Her eyes were also slightly red. Her fringe slipped over her forehead and she threw her pen with a slam. She supported her chin in one hand and tapped her fingers on the table. After so many days, Lin Siren knew almost all of Qin Ran's personality and habits. She leaned over and whispered, "I heard that the school bully. That Wei Zihang just transferred to our school." Lin Siren didn't finish when she remembered that Qin Ran knew Wei Zihang well. "He's here as a sports student." Wei Zihang wasn't from First Middle School, but his fame here wasn't lower than that of Su Yaoguang. To a certain extent, it was even higher. He used to be in Z High School and, although the students of First Middle School were afraid of him, it wasn't too big a deal. But now the school bully was transferring over to First Middle School. In their eyes, it was tantamount to putting a wolf in the middle of a group of sheep. "Oh." Qin Ran nodded, continued to pick up the pen to start the question, and turned up the volume of her headset a bit. Fortunately, the class bell rang, and these discussions disappeared. After school at night, Qin Ran waited for the other students to leave before packing up. Ran, let's go out and buy some materials first. Lin Siren closed her book and waited for Qin Ran. Li Erong had arranged a new review information book and had asked them to purchase it at the bookstore next to the school to use in class later. At the same time, outside the school gate, there weren't many people on the road, but because school had just been dismissed, there were actually quite a few people walking together. "Aunt, are you here to visit Principal Su?" Qin Yu said hello to Su Yaoguang and went towards them, holding a book. A few people who had yet to notice Su Yaoguang paused when they heard the words, Principal Su. Su Yaoguang had always been proud and had never taken the initiative to greet someone. Lin Wan didn't pay attention to Su Yaoguang and shook her head slightly. "I saw his assistant. How many people in Beijing wanted to meet Elder Su? In Beijing, she might even have to take a queue number. Principal Su has always been difficult to see." Qin Yu wasn't surprised. She lowered her head again. The group was very eye-catching, especially Lin Wan, who had her own nobility. She was about to get in the car. "Aunt, second cousin, why are you here?" After cleaning up and coming out late, Mu Ying saw them and quickly loosened Li Yuhan's hand and trotted over. Mu Ying wasn't wearing a school uniform today, but a new skirt Ning Wei had bought for her in the mall. It was a little too long. Ning Wei had to raise a family, and there was even a family member in a vegetative state. How could she have so much money on her hands? She just bought new clothes for Mu Ying, but the pattern and colors were all discounted goods from last year. It was cheap but unfashionable. Lin Wan had been in Beijing for a long time, and she was used to judging people. Mu Ying was a little uncomfortable. She pinched her skirt and saw the figure walking away not far away. She beckoned for her quickly. "Cousin, Aunt is here." Qin Ran was too lazy to care about them. She rolled her eyes and turned up the volume on her earphones. A jeep stopped slowly beside her, honking its horn and lowering the window. Lin Wan noticed that it was Beijing's license plate. She suddenly said in shock, "Isn't that Principal Su's car?" Chapter 49. Disobedient. You are listening at novelfull.audio. There was a certain distance between Beijing and Yuncheng, and the license plate number of Beijing was mostly rare. They knew that in the whole school, only Principal Su was from Beijing. That was why Lin Wan had exclaimed that. It was just that it was difficult to see Principal Su and nobody knew what car he drove. Ning Qin and Qin Yu both shook their heads slightly. Qin Yu pursed her lips and said nothing, but Ning Qin looked at Qin Ran with a frown. "I don't know if it is." Qin Ran. The window lowered, and Principal Su was in the back seat, sitting sideways. Qin Ran let go and looked slightly positive. She called, "Principal Su." Principal Su looked at Qin Ran and thought of when Cheng Wan had come to find him. He knocked on his knee and was a little strange. "Are you going out to eat? Get in, let's go together." His eyes were very mild and pure like a kind elder. His tone wasn't mandatory and was more like a polite question. Qin Ran shook her head. "I want to buy books with my desk mate." The two said a few more words and the jeep drove away. Before they went far, Lin Siren was already standing beside Qin Ran, staring at her. When the car drove away, she still wasn't back to her senses and had to be dragged by Qin Ran. Qin Ran dragged Lin Siren with one hand, put on her headphones again with the other and adjusted the volume. Her eyes were still slightly red and she looked impatient and cold. She directly passed Ning Qin and Lin Wan. As if she didn't know them. Ning Qin and Qin Yu didn't speak to her, nor did they call her. Lin Wan glanced at the window as the car passed by. The window was anti-peeping and she couldn't see who was inside. She knew that Qin Ran's recommendation letter had been written by Principal Su. This was always something she just couldn't figure out. This was the first time Lin Wan had met Qin Ran and she had to admit that she was beautiful. No wonder Lin Chi's attitude towards Qin Ran was better than she had expected. Lin Wan looked up and down Qin Ran again and examined her. When she judged people, she was always condescending. Qin Yu noticed Lin Wan's gaze and smiled. I heard that my sister was originally in our class, but our head teacher was afraid that it would affect the learning in our class, so she didn't want her. Lin Wan retracted her gaze. She hadn't really seen Qin Ran's resume, but she had heard about it. When she stayed in the Lin family's house, Aunt Zhang had told her a lot. She was deep in thought and looked away. BL.net. She glanced slightly past Qin Ran, moved away, and said, "Let's go." From beginning to end, she didn't talk to Muing. Lin Wan looked very powerful. Muing had wanted to call Qin Ran, but after seeing how Ning Qing and the rest didn't even call her, she was stunned and didn't say anything. Ning Qing said something to Muing and then kept up with Lin Wan. Muing stood behind them, watching Lin Wan get on a black BMW. Her eyes lingered on the driver's hand. The driver had just picked up Qin Yu's backpack, and it was obvious that there was a delicate and beautiful pink cup hanging on the edge of the backpack. This pink cup wasn't the same as the one Qin Ran used. Although it was also good looking, it didn't have a logo and didn't look like a luxury item. It looked like the cups that Muing often saw in boutiques and wasn't expensive. Muing suddenly felt a little cyanotic and a little bit confused. The Lin family had bought such an expensive cup for Qin Ran, but why didn't they buy it for Qin Yu? The school sent so much information, and the English teacher also asked us to buy extracurricular books. Lin Siren finally regained her senses and went to find the books with Qin Ran. Li Erong taught several English classes. The English materials here were sold out. The manager asked them to come back tomorrow morning for a new batch. The bookstore was relatively quiet. Qin Ran's headphones were still hanging around her neck, but she didn't stuff it in her ears. She leaned against the bookshelf and found another foreign book. She held it with one hand and her voice was relaxed. "Let's go back." Lin Siren was afraid that she wouldn't be able to buy the books tomorrow, so she asked the bookstore owner to leave her 2 copies and paid the deposit before leaving. This bookstore was bigger than all the rest. In the alley, there were many people reading books in the bookstore. As a result, the sound coming from the end of an alley seemed a little clear. It was the voice of a few teenagers, and Qin Ran saw the corner of their clothes. It was red and black, not First Middle School's nor Z High School's uniforms. They were noisy and loud. Qin Ran shoved the earphones around her neck into her ears. Lin Siren was also a bit scared and she pulled on Qin Ran's sleeves. Ran, let's go back to school first." The group of teenagers in the alley seemed to stop, and one of them suddenly laughed. "Ah, isn't this our classmate Pan? Yo, she's still wearing her high school uniform. Are you still in First Middle School?" His tone was very discomforting. Lin Siren frowned. She dragged Qin Ran and wanted to tell the security guard about this when she went back to school. Within a few seconds, the annoying voice spoke again, "Pan Mingyue, you harmed me last time and you can still attend First Middle School as if nothing happened. You're impressive, eh?" Several First Middle School students trotted out of the alley in a panic. Lin Siren froze. She dragged Qin Ran's hand and said in a tense tone, Ran, that's Mingyue." She took out her cell phone, called the police first, and then went to the guard. Brother Su, you're too much. Be careful, it's not good if the knife strikes the girl's face. Her face is really white." Several bursts of laughter sounded. "Take it for me." Qin Ran handed the book in her hand to Lin Siren, then cracked her head and loosened the neckline of her uniform shirt. "I'll take a look." Lin Siren looked at her calm face, told her not to mess around, and then ran to the school to find security. The police would surely take a while to come. Qin Ran always kept in mind that she wanted her grandmother to spend a comfortable old age and not to worry about her. So she had refrained from making trouble in Yuncheng. Until now, She watched Pan Mingyue leaning against the wall, her glasses pulled down. She was cruelly thrown aside and her eyes enlarged like a thread puppet. Looking closely, there was panic in those eyes. The teenager with silver hair called Brother Su held Pan Mingyue's face in one hand and a knife in his other hand, making a gesticulation at her face. Bang! From the moment she arrived in Yuncheng, Qin Ran's tight nerves were finally broken. Someone noticed Qin Ran. A person with purple hair took the lead to notice Qin Ran. "What are you looking at? I promised my grandmother to study hard and be a good person." Qin Ran whispered. She seemed to be in breach of her grandmother's agreement and couldn't be obedient. Chapter 50. Looking for Death. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. A man with purple hair took the lead to notice Qin Ran. He was holding a cigarette and said with a vile voice, "What are you looking at?" Every scene flashed through her mind. Screams, explosions, blood soaking through the earth. Qin Ran took off her headphones and uniform and tossed it aside. She looked up at the person called Brother Su coldly and evilly. "Su Shen, do you remember me telling you to stay away from me?" She stepped forward, reached out, and grabbed the dagger in Su Shen's hand. Blood ran down the palm of her hand, scaring the group of young people. The originally fierce teenagers calmed down at this moment and all looked at her. Su Shen was startled and took a step back. He stared at her as her expression darkened, and a savage and aggressive look passed by her face. He loosened his dagger and gestured a taekwondo posture. Snap! Qin Ran released his hand in a hurry. The dagger fell to the ground and shook it a bit. She took a step back, widened her distance, and turned around to make a round kick in Su Shen's chest. Boom! The person was taken down. The others reacted and rushed up. Qin Ran raised her other hand and pressed someone's hand, kicking him in the stomach at the same time. Qin Ran. Su Shen supported himself off the ground and spit out blood. He tried to climb up but failed to. The siren sounded not far away. Qin Ran squeezed her right hand, put on her uniform and stood beside Su Shen. She lowered her head and didn't pull her zipper, so her white coat was stained with bright red blood. She squatted and stepped on Su Shen's hand. Her pretty eyes narrowed slightly and she stretched out a white finger, then pressed Su Shen's throat. She dragged out her tone pleasant. "Why didn't you listen to me?" Not far away, Qin Yu was originally walking with Ning Qing and Lin Wan, but she couldn't get the materials that Li Erong had wanted. She let the driver stop at the intersection. She had come down to buy the books and the driver had first sent Ning Qing to the hotel not far away. Seeing this, Qin Yu took a moment to look around and didn't go to the bookstore. Instead, she took out her phone and called Ning Qing. "Mom," Qin Yu watched the police car parked not far away. "Sister seems to be fighting with someone and went to the Public Security Bureau." On the other side of the phone, Ning Qing's expression changed. She took a step outside the hotel and, after making sure that Lin Wan and Lin Qi couldn't hear her, she whispered, "What the hell is going on?" Qin Yu was also unclear, so she just said a few words in a vague manner. "Don't tell your dad and your aunt about this. I'll go to the police station first." Yunqing Police Station Branch. The young policeman held a pen and sat opposite Qin Ran with a pen. "Qin Ran, tell me your parents' contact information, and why you hit them." Qin Ran leaned back to the chair and pinched her right hand. The blood leaked out and stained her uniform. She had no expression on her face and her eyebrows looked good under the lights. She didn't look at the policeman, but she played with her fingers on her left hand and propped her legs up. She said casually, "I don't like the sight of him." The dispatch was near the school. The police had seen all kinds of offensive students here before, and with just one glance at Qin Ran, he could tell that she was a common offender. "You beat him up just because of that. Young lady, you're pretty impressive, eh?" Soon, a list of injuries came out. At first glance, the police determined that the most severely beaten Su Shen had to stay in the hospital for a few days. He patted the table. He had seen many cases like this, but he had never seen anyone who showed no signs of repentance after hitting someone. He sneered and was a little disgusted. "Fine, you're from First Middle School, right? I've already informed your school. At this rate, you will have to be detained. I'll wait for your parents to come." Someone knocked on the door outside. "Xiao Li, their family is here." Officer Li went out and happened to see Ning Qing. A policewoman was handing out a list for Ning Qing to fill in. Seeing Officer Li, Ning Qing squeezed her bag. This was the first time she was here and she felt uncomfortable all over. "Police officer, I am Qin Ran's mother." Officer Li looked at Ning Qing and sneered. "Common offender." Ning Qing's face became embarrassed instantly. She was stiff and she spoke anxiously, "Officer Li, where is she?" Officer Li glanced at her and took the list. "She's under interrogation inside." "How did you teach her as her mother?" Ning Qing was embarrassed about being educated by the police officer and she stood there stiffly. Everyone in the police station looked at her, but she didn't want to care about it for a moment. But Lin Wan was still in Yuncheng. So many people in the Lin family knew the existence of her eldest daughter and were waiting to gossip about her. If she didn't care about it now, news of Qin Ran being detained in the police station would surely spread to the Lin family. Su Shen was taken to the hospital because of serious injuries, and the police took statements from others. Several other teenagers gave their statements. Only Pan Mingyue did not speak. She kept her head buried in her knees and didn't listen to anyone. "Your daughter is still inside, she is very stubborn and doesn't admit wrong or cooperate with us. She can only be detained if this goes on." Officer Li threw the list on the table. Ning Qing's brain froze and she said, "Officer Li, let me in to persuade her." A smartly dressed old lady came in from the gate and groaned as she entered. Who hit my grandson? Where is my grandson? Where is he?" When Ning Qing saw the old lady, she was stunned. Grandma Su. She had previously found a violin teacher for Qin Ran, and this grandma was exactly that teacher's mother. The old lady was anxious about her grandson. She heard Ning Qing's voice and narrowed her eyes to look at her. It took her a while to recognize her. "Grandma Su, let's discuss things slowly. How much do you want?" Ning Qing lowered her head and murmured in a low voice. Her brain crashed. Would she go to jail? Then criminal records would be left behind. No way. "Who wants your money?" said the old lady with a sharp tongue. She called her family again. "What are you still looking at? Your son has been beaten and sent to the hospital. Call the officer at once." She was really looking for death. School medical office. Lu Xiaoying looked out of the door again and touched his ear studs. Why hasn't Qin Ran come yet? Cheng Wan glanced at him and said nothing. He continued reading his medical book in his hand with his head lowered. His knuckles were obvious and he wrote in the book. Lu Xiaoying watched him sullenly. He would see how long he could stand it for. 5 minutes later, Cheng Wan raised his head, put the pen aside, and closed the book in his hand. He took out his phone and glanced at it. There was no new message displayed on it. It was still the text message sent by Qin Ran 10 minutes ago. "I have matters to settle, I'm taking leave." The sentence he had asked behind was like a stone sinking in the ocean. Cheng Wan furrowed his brows. He only received a call from the school when he was about to start eating. He rose suddenly. Lu Xiaoying was holding his chopsticks and was stunned. "Master Wan, where are you going?"